Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Well, here in the state of Indiana, April brings a number of things, one of which are tornadoes and thunderstorms. But every few years, it brings something else to the state of Indiana, and this is known as primary election. And that's what's going on this year, folks, one of the biggest primary elections we've seen in a long, long time. It's a state election, not a national election, and it's for the 15th District State Senate in Indiana, and two candidates are vying mightily. One is incumbent, Liz Brown. She's been, I believe, in office since 2014, and she wants to be reelected again. And she's gotten a lot of power down in Indianapolis, runs some committees, and, she knows where she's going and she knows what she wants to do. But she's being challenged this year by Darren Vogt. Darren Vogt challenged her originally in the election in 2014. She won, he lost, but he's back again to take another shot at seeing if he can defeat Liz Brown. Well, as a result, everywhere you turn, anytime you turn on your radio, your television, you're going to see commercials, political commercials saying, elect me, don't elect the other guy. The other guy is bad, I'm great. That's the way politics works, folks. But the big thing is, how much are they spending? Where's their money coming from that they spend? You think they're opening up their own wallets and spending their own money? No, not when people are willing to donate to their campaign to let them have spending dollars to get themselves elected. So I thought you might be interested in knowing where the money is coming from for this particular state Senate race. When it comes down to Liz Brown, she's already raised $722,000. That's nearly $750,000 for a state elected position, state senator. She spent roughly $600,000 of that $722,000. And who's the big donors behind her? Now I'm going to give you the big donors, not all the donors, just the big donors. Big donors include the Parkview Health CEO, Rick Henvey. He gave $10,000. Richard Byers Jr. totaled up $40,000. The Indiana Realtors PAC, those are the realtors of northeastern Indiana, gave her $25,000. And the Indiana Senate GOP, this is the GOP for the state of Indiana, they put $72,500 into her coffers. They are the main donors for Liz Brown to be reelected. Now you're going, well, my goodness, gosh, $750,000 for a Senate race? Yep. Well, her opponent, Darren Vogt, who's, like I said, he tried earlier back in 2014. He's now running again. Thus far, he has raised $293,000 to Liz's, $750,000. So he's got less than $350,000. She's got $750,000. He's already spent about $227,000. So where did Darren Vogt get his money from? Who was supporting Darren Vogt? Well, let's take a look at his notable donors. Chuck Sirac, Sweetwater Sound, $2,500. Steel Dynamics co-founder Keith Bussey, $4,500 from him. Chad Beckert donated $8,000. Senator Jim Banks, his campaign ponied up $25,000. So Senator Banks in Washington, D.C. thinks that Darren Vogt might be the guy. And then the Indiana Attorney General, Todd Rokita, his campaign opened their wallet and gave the candidacy of Darren Vogt $75,000. Now, those are the major donors, folks. Those are the people who are putting up the big money and saying, hey, we want this person. I don't really have a dog in this fight either way, but we're going to have a state Senate candidate come out of the primaries. Will it be Liz Brown for her fourth, fifth term, whatever it happens to be? Or will it be the young upstart who tried to go against her back in 2014 and just barely lost, Darren Vogt? Darren, in case you don't know, his family is, remember Tom's Donuts? Remember those donut places? Well, that's his family. I guess he grew up making donuts. But he's also on the Northwest Allen County School Board. This is a political campaign. Who's going to win, who's going to lose, and who is going forward for the November general election? This is not the general election. This is merely the primary. And for the primary, Liz Brown raised $750,000. And Darren Vogt, about $350,000. Who's going to win? It's anybody's guess. I don't know. This is a very hotly contested election. And frankly, either one, well, could be good down in the state. It just depends on who you like, who you don't, who you want in office, and who you don't want in office. That's your call. But overall, the election is coming up. Liz Brown or Darren Vogt? Now you know who's donating to them. If you're concerned about that, well, you can ask them. But beyond that, it's the political season, folks. Whether it's tornadoes, thunderstorms, or primary elections. Right now, you're getting all three here in the state of Indiana in 2026. And now, you know. You know, May is a very important month in the state of Indiana. Why? The Indy 500 happens in May. And everything kind of revolves around that race, except this year, there's a little something special happening, not down in Indianapolis. No, it's happening right here in the Summit City, Fort Wayne. Because on May the 2nd, the opening day for a brand new stadium on the southwest side of Fort Wayne, right next to I-69, it's Ruhoff Stadium. And it opens up on May the 2nd because the Fort Wayne Football Club, soccer for those of you that don't understand, has their opening game. And it's going to be a unique game because it's going to be played on a brand new field in a brand new stadium that opens up for the very first time. Now, this stadium's been under construction for a while, and it's taken a while to get it up because winter was not exactly habitable to a whole lot of folks around here. But they're getting things done. The field is laid, sod is down, seats are going in at a rate of 1,000 seats per day are being put in for a total of 9,200 seats. Now, if you go to the game on May the 2nd, well, the big giant super scoreboard is not going to be installed yet. It's coming, but it's going to be one of the biggest scoreboards you've ever seen here in the state of Indiana, or at least here in Fort Wayne. But that game starts May the 2nd. And if you want to get your tickets, now's the time to do it by contacting the Fort Wayne Football Club. See about getting your tickets for that event, because that, folks, is going to be a very, very big event. Because the first time in history, we're going to have our own football club. They're part of the USL Level 1 League, and it's a good chance for you to see some great soccer. But here's the cool thing. This stadium could be used for other things, like concerts, even football games, believe it or not, because they can turn it into a football field. They can have it for all sorts of things could be played on that field. And because it's big, it's got a full capacity of 9,200 people. And even if you set it up for a concert, you could put 10,000 people in there. All of these things could happen with a brand new stadium, Ruhoff Field. It opens up May the 2nd for the first game of the league for the Fort Wayne Football Club. Plan on being there, folks, because it's going to be a very special event and a whole lot of fun. And your chance to see a brand new stadium opening up. That's Ruhoff Stadium here in Fort Wayne for the Fort Wayne Football Club's opening game. It's coming up May the 2nd, and now you know. Well, today President Trump did something that's going to make a certain portion of America very happy, and then another portion of America, well, very angry or sad. You got to decide which side you're on. Here's what happened. Today, the president signed an executive order making marijuana, marijuana, cannabis. Well, it took it from being a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3 drug. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means a lot of things. It's no longer in the same ballpark as certain other things like heroin, because marijuana was formerly considered on the same par with heroin, an LSD. But it was never supposed to be that way, and politically, it became a fireball that was knocked around and used for some very bad political things. I'll explain that to you in a moment. You have to understand that going back to the 1930s, there was a gentleman by the name of Anslinger. Henry Anslinger was the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Okay, that's the 1930s. And he had a campaign that was built on, what we call racial and xenophobic fear. What happened was, after the Mexican-American War, a lot of Mexicans were coming up from the South, bringing this medicinal plant with them called cannabis. But they called it marijuana. It's a Mexican term, if you will. But it sounded really good, and it sounded like it would scare the white people in America by calling it marijuana. Comes from Mexico, and would literally frighten everybody, and they go, oh my gosh, that stuff is terrible. He also said, okay, that was a problem with the Mexicans, and he also was concerned about labeling black people because those American jazz musicians were smoking this stuff. He said it created reefer madness, things like insanity, violence, sexual depravity. That was the narrative, and it was a political strategy, folks. That's what it was. So the slang term marijuana, was actually used to replace the clinical term cannabis, because that's what it's called, or industrial hemp. Now, it was designed, this whole campaign was designed to sound foreign and menacing to folks, and it certainly worked. But it turns out there were other highfalutin people that wanted marijuana or cannabis gone. William Randolph Hearst and the DuPont family. Because you see, Randolph Hearst said, hey, that hemp fiber, that's going to mess up making paper, because he had the newspapers. You print newspapers on paper. That's what they're there for. And the DuPont family, well, they're working on drugs, and they didn't see marijuana as being a thing that would affect their drug making, because if they wanted to cure you of stuff, they wanted to create a drug to cure you with, and not a plant. So there was politicals involved in this thing, but here it goes on bigger. In 1970, the Congress decided they were going to do a new law. It was called the Controlled Substance Act of 1970. This is where marijuana was still a Class 1 drug, but other agencies looked at it and said, no, we're not going to do that. And they wrote commissions, and reports were done that said, hey, it's stupid to have marijuana as a Class 1 drug. So when this thing was being done and finished up by Congress, well, they went to the president. Oh, here's the latest information about marijuana. He said, We have anti-drug going on here. Everything's got to be a drug. Marijuana stays as a Class 1 drug. And he was very definite about that. But the thing that makes it even more, well, insidious, if you will, during the Nixon campaign at the White House, back then they had two enemies. This is difficult to say. Leftists and the black folks. Leftists and African Americans. According to an interview with John Ehrlichman that was done in 1994. Now keep in mind, this interview was done in 1994 with Ehrlichman, but it wasn't published till 2016. That's when it was finally released. And he talked about the war on drugs and how it became a political football. Ehrlichman said they have two strategies, and I'm going to quote him here. This is a quote. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and marijuana, then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. This is a quote from, then he went on to say, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did, unquote. So this is a political football. Now, other presidents have tried to say, okay, gee whiz, we got to do something about this, we got to change it. But you have to understand, when they class something, they use three things to class it with. 1, high potential for abuse. 2, no currently accepted medical use. And 3, lack of accepted safety. Now, those are the three things they used to classify marijuana as Schedule 1. Trouble was, it was a placeholder. It never was planned to be that way. They just put it there for a temporary situation. It ultimately became a permanent situation. And as a result, the Class 1 stayed even today as a controlled substance. Well, now, the president said, we're moving to Class 3. Now, how is that a big deal? Well, it's still going to be illegal because under federal law. Still going to be illegal. But banks will now be able to utilize their services with marijuana stores because previously they couldn't. It'd get money laundering because it was a federal crime. So now banks can get involved. But here's the bigger thing to people running these cannabis shops. Previously, they couldn't deduct anything. They had to pay the full federal taxes on what they did, like 80 to 90%. That's how bad it was, no deductions. Well, now as a Class 3, it can be used for tax purposes. You can do deductions, make it into a real business. That's what happens when you make it a Class 3. Now, there are going to be people in Congress, I can guarantee you, that are going to yell, scream, and holler saying, how dare he do that? Because Congress voted that law in 1970. Only Congress can change the law. They can't change it from Class 1 to a Class 3. That has to be done by Congress. I guarantee you that's going to happen. Because the Trump syndrome people, they got the Trump syndrome. They're going to do what they do. This is politics, folks. The entire thing of marijuana being a Class 1 drug was politics from the get-go. And now Trump wants to turn it into Class 3 where it should have been in the first place, and everybody knows it. And it's going to be a political football. Just watch. So now you know. It's going from a Class 1 to a Class 3 by executive order, but Congress, members of Congress will still say, you have to change the law. You can't do it by executive fiat. That's what's going on, folks. But may it change things? It may very well. Could it end up in the courts? Well, you pretty well guessed that too. But overall, let's see what happens. Will marijuana finally be a Class 3 drug? Or will Congress demand it stay as a Class 1 drug? That's the political football that's about to be played. And now, you know. Here's something I'll bet you didn't know. The religion of Islam has been at war with the United States before the U.S. Revolution occurred back in 1776. Yes, that's correct. Islam was waging war against the United States before we were even the United States of America. It seems that U.S. merchant ships were sailing into the Mediterranean. And back in that particular time, they were under the flag of the British because, well, we were under the flag of the British, but they were attacked by pirates. Pirates from countries like Tripoli, Tunis, Morocco, and Algeria. And they were all Islamic pirates. As a matter of fact, the whole area was called the Barbary Coast, and that ended up in a big giant war. And that war started in the late 1700s and went on for 4 years. And here's what happened during that time. During that time, when Thomas Jefferson finally became president of the U.S., he said, I'm tired of this stuff because what these pirates were doing, they were taking the ships and demanding a huge amounts of ransom from the United States. And the United States was paying it, much to the chagrin of Jefferson. And he said to Congress, I've had enough. And he sent a bunch of frigates over to the Mediterranean, and he put these new Marines aboard. And he said, okay, boys, you see these pirates, you fight them, you take them out, and you take out the entire colony if you have to. They did. But going into battle, the Marines wore these leather collars, big, thick leather collars. And it's because the pirates had these simian swords. And what they would try to do during a fight, they'd try to whack off the soldier's head in a battle. Well, the swords would hit the leather collar, bounce off. And then the Marines would kill all the pirates. Well, ultimately, the Marines literally went to the homes of the pirates, the home bases, and destroyed their home bases and killed everybody. Said they'd had enough. Well, when that started to happen and war was going on, Tunis and Algeria said, we don't want part of this. But Tripoli continued fighting. And that war lasted 4 years. Now, as it turns out, the Marines' hymn, To the Shores of Tripoli, that's in the Marines' hymn. And now they talk about the fighting leathernecks. Now you know where the term leathernecks came from. But as a result, we have been fighting Islam since, well, before the Revolutionary War. Now, back many, many years ago, Thomas Jefferson and Sam Adams went over to Great Britain and met with the ambassador in Tripoli and said, why the heck are you guys fighting us? The ambassador told Jefferson and Sam Adams the reason was Islam. He said Islam is what it is because Islam is from the Quran. And the Quran says we are the mighty, we are the powerful, and if you are not one of us, then you are against us, and we have every right to kill you, take you prisoner, because you are an infidel. And as an infidel, you do not deserve to live. And the Quran, as we know it, still exists today. It's the same Quran back in the ancient days. Now, there's two factions of the Islamic religion that exist. There's the Sunnis and the Shia. Sunnis are basically about 80% of all the Muslims in the world. But the rebel faction, the radical faction, are the Shia. They are still living under the concept of the Quran dating back to the 7th century. And they believe that if they die in battle, they die for the cause, they go to paradise. And the mullahs and the ayatollahs are telling them, here's what you have to do, and they believe it. And they will carry that on. And dying to them means nothing, because dying to them means they go to paradise. Well, that Quran that was used back in the Revolutionary War era still exists today. And today, well, you understand what's happening both in Europe and here in the United States. It is a problem, folks, but it's a problem that's been going on for 250 years. And eventually, every country in the world is going to have to deal with this, including the United States. When will we say enough, and when will we respond? I don't know, but I can tell you this. If we don't, eventually, those who believe that we are infidels will want to take us over and control this country. And I don't think you want that to happen. And now you know. Well, the primary election for the state of Indiana and the county of Allen is coming up next month. And not very often do I have a chance to interview someone who's running for office because, well, that's not something I normally do. But in this case, I ran across a young lady in the most unusual way who actually is running for re-election. And I thought you might be interested in learning who she is and what job she does, because it turns out the job she does is pretty doggone important. I just didn't realize how important it was. Her name is Nicole Keesling, and she is the current recorder. Now, people are saying, what the heck is a recorder? I didn't know what it was. Turns out the recorder is responsible for recording every piece of property that is sold and bought in the county of Allen. So you have one for each county. And she has to keep documents dating back over 100 years. They have to keep documents for at least 500 years. And I'm going, how do you store all that stuff? Stuff I didn't know. Well, Nicole was elected 4 years ago, first term. And it turns out her mom is pretty well known in Fort Wayne politics because her mom is the city clerk. And her mom's now the Republican state bigwig, and she goes around all over the place. But Nicole has an interesting background, and how she got into this job is really kind of surprising, too. Well, anyway, she's been in it for 4 years, is now running for re-election. And you can only serve 2 terms as recorder. That's all you can do. So she's going into her second and final term. So I interviewed her. And I'm giving you some little outtakes from the interview so you know exactly what she said when I asked her questions. The biggest one we talked about was how I met her. The circumstance is really a little bit different, but take a listen. This is how I met Nicole Keesling back about a year ago. Take a listen. It happened about a year ago when WoWo Radio had their 100th anniversary party. And they were celebrating at the top of the old Fort Wayne National Bank building, a place that used to be called the Summit Club. Well, it's still pretty cool up there, but they had their big meeting and I was invited to attend. Now, I was seated on the east side of the room, and she and her mom were seated on the west side of the room. I didn't even know who she was or she was there, but she was invited up onto the dais, and they gave her some sort of award. And during the time she was talking about listening to WoWo, growing up as a child, she said, oh, yeah, one of the people I listened to, aside from Charlie Butcher in the morning, was Pat White in the afternoon. And I went, oh, my God, she's talking about when she was a kid. So at the end of the meeting, I ended up walking to her side of the room, tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, hi, I'm Pat White. And the woman darn near fainted. I got to tell you, she was so stunned when she heard me talking to her, and she got up and we talked and chatted, and her mom was there with her. Ultimately, her mom said, hey, can we get a group photo? And it was like one of them selfie things, and we got the photo and everything else. Well, since then, I've kind of followed what she's going on in her life, and I must tell you, this lady's smart, but she's doing stuff that I don't have the brains to do, but she does. And her name was Nicole Keesling. And Nicole, I hope that was a good introduction.
No, being at the WoWo 100th, it was amazing just to see the history. And, I was there because we recorded a document celebrating the 100th anniversary of WoWo so that it would go down in the public record of the county that WoWo was celebrating its 100th day. And I was thinking about all my WoWo memories, and you're definitely at the top of the list. So it's a full circle being on your show now after listening to you growing up as a child.
All right, so she's in this job. She's been in it for 4 years, but I asked her, how did you get into this job? What's the history behind you getting into this job? And her answer was pretty surprising.
Yeah. So, I had this interest in middle school. Obviously, I couldn't drive myself, but I started going to Republican events, and my mom started driving me, and that's how she got involved. And, I was then in high school interning for Congressman Marlin Stutzman, and that's when she actually decided to run for office. But I've just always had this love of politics. And after college, I worked for the Indiana Republican Party, and then I moved out to Washington, D.C., and I was the scheduler for then Congressman, now Senator Jim Banks. And it turns out I did not like living in DC as much as I liked visiting DC. It's very expensive. I was not living in a very safe area. It's a whole other world out there. And I really wanted to come home. And I got a phone call from the recorder asking if I would be interested in working in her office. And then I started working in the office, and then I was approached about running for recorder. I never had any plans to be an elected official. It was not in my bingo card for life, but sometimes the Lord presents opportunities to us.
Well, just so
I like I said, I never planned on being an elected official at all. It was just an opportunity that came up, and I love the recorder's office. I loved what I did. We have a very important job that a lot of people don't understand, but when they do come to us, we're able to help them, and that's really what I enjoy doing, is being able to use the office to help people that come to us and need it.
Then I asked her about her mom being the city clerk, the first Republican and have been elected city clerk for decades. Take a listen to her response on that.
Yep, she was the first Republican female city clerk ever, and the first Republican elected to the city clerk's office probably in about 40 years.
Now, the biggest thing the recorder does, it alerts people if something happens, and they can contact you by your phone, email, or whatever, and say, hey, someone's trying to rewrite the contract on your property, and someone is doing this because this is a big issue going on. Here's how she took that question on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our free property fraud alert. It was established back in 2008 when John McGauley was recorder. But one of the things that I committed to in my first campaign when I ran for recorder the first time was expanding this property fraud alert. And our signups have gone through the roof. You can actually log on to our website, allencountyrecorder.us. And I like to keep track of how many people have signed up over the last few years. But we've had so many people sign up since I took over because we've done a good job of promoting it. And you see a lot of commercials about property fraud happening all over the place.
Yep.
But it's a real issue that people don't realize is happening. I had a police officer from the Fishers PD contact me yesterday. And then today we had another police officer contact us from Fort Wayne PD about a fraud case. So it is out there happening, and we're trying to help people. The other thing I introduced is our free notary fraud alert. So notaries can be notified if their notary commission is being used in the recorder's office to make sure that they're only using it for what it's supposed to be used on.
And so I asked her, how do you document all the items you handle? Because you handle thousands of items every single year. And here was her response.
Yep. So last year we recorded 60,179 documents.
Where do you put them?
So all of these are digital. They come into us, we scan them, and then we give the paper copy back. If there's a paper copy to the individual, if not, then it gets sent back to whoever sent it to us. But we take them in, we scan them, we house them on our servers, and then again, we microfilm them and send them off.
Well, anytime you're talking to a politician, you want to know, what do you plan to do if you get reelected? And I asked her that question, and here's the way she answered.
So my next kind of venture, if I'm reelected, is to continue on this path of combating property fraud. It's a growing issue. It's something we're seeing more and more. Up in Detroit, actually, I was talking to their county recorder. They have a full-time sheriff deputy assigned and a police car for the recorder.
Oh my God.
But they found deed factories up there where they had a row of typewriters and people were just making fake deeds, because if you get one passed, it's going to pay off for your entire operation. So looking at ways that we can work with law enforcement and people in the real estate world, like realtors, title companies, attorneys, on how we can prevent these fraudulent transactions from happening.
Well, then you get in a big portion about, being a recorder. That's fine. That's one thing. But what's the most important thing? I said, what do people need to realize most about your office, and why is it important that you do what you do?
Absolutely. So a lot of people rely on our documents. So that's why it's important to have a recorder that knows what they're doing to maintain them. I mean, law enforcement relies on our documents, the highway department, the assessor's office, the auditor's office, city utilities, the fire department has used our documents. I mean, they're out there on public record. And so we have to be able to trust who we have as the owner of property, or again, we're going to have a not very well functioning society.
And finally, the biggest thing I asked her, I said, look, okay, you do this job, recorder. Do you ever have fun in life? What do you do for fun in life? And wait till you hear her response. Take a listen to this.
I do a lot of puzzles. I am a docent at the Allen County Courthouse. I love giving tours, showing off the history and the beautiful building. I do a lot of off-road jeeping, and recently I started getting into demolition derbies and have been
What?
driving in demolition
Excuse
derbies.
me? Demolition derby? Why on earth demolition derby?
So it's a hobby that my boyfriend has done for 15 years. And I started helping him build cars because, of course, in derbies, you have to take out all the glass, all the plastic, you have to weld on parts to the car. And so I started helping him build his derby cars. And he said, hey, do you want to build one for you? And I thought, why not? Let's go ahead and do it. And so I've done 2 demolition derbies. I'm not very good. I'm much better at recording than I am demolition driving, but I love it. It's fun.
And finally, I asked, what do you vision for if you're reelected?
So, from re-election campaign, another thing that I'm focusing on is accessibility of documents and technology. As technology progresses, we're going to have more and more opportunities to upgrade it and make things more accessible and function better for our staff, which I want to give a shout out to my staff. They're amazing. Between all of them, we have over 100 years in the recorder's office. So, I couldn't do what I do without my amazing staff. But I want to make things easier. I want to make documents more accessible. We have some film in the office that was going to be thrown away by a different office, and we saved it from the trash can. And we're working on getting all of it scanned in so that people can view it. They're public records. And so we think people have the right to be able to see them. But we're looking at technology to make documents more and more accessible for everybody in the county.
So if I wanted to look up a deed for a property, say I owned 10, 15, 20 years ago, I can go online now and actually look it up through your office, a computer system?
Yeah, absolutely. You can actually sign up to have a subscription plan with us to look at our documents, or for a one-time search. And we also have something called the Neighborhood Resource Center, where you can log on and you can see your neighborhoods, if you live in one, the covenants and the plat, completely free of charge.
You can see the covenants in your particular neighborhood. You can see that online?
Yep, and the plat. So the plat has the boundaries of each lot, and you just go in there and you can see the measurements, and you can also see the easements on either side.
Oh, and ask one last thing. Is this your career choice forever? And wait till you find out the answer to that.
So recorders are term limited. We're a constitutional office, meaning we can only serve 2 consecutive terms. So I'm going to
really? So
Yep,
it's a
one more
it's a
time.
2-term deal.
Yep, and then you're done. So the other thing I want to mention about the recorder's office, and I think this is my favorite thing, we are the only self-funded office in the county, meaning we are the only office that does not take a single taxpayer dollar. We operate completely off of the fees that we bring in for copies.
So there you go. Nicole Keesling is running to be reelected as the recorder. Like I said, I didn't know what a recorder was. But apparently, if you own a home and you have documents, she's responsible for those documents, and she can tell you if somebody's trying to mess with your property. You can contact them by phone, email, you can do the whole thing, and they can send you everything. Pretty simple to do, pretty important job. And you know what? It's not paid for by the taxpayer. That's the cool part about it. So, now you understand what's going on. Recorder's on the ballot. That lady who's running, she's doing a good job so far. If you want to elect her again, it's your call. Nicole Keesling, your Allen County recorder, running for re-election. And now you know.